Every season there seems to be a managerial kid on the block who the pundits rave over and tip for the big job in the future. But how many of them actually make it? Let's take a look at 8 once promising Premier League managers who have since disappeared. Let's hope we won't be adding you to the list in a couple of years, David. Phil Brown. A few people rated Phil Brown quite highly about 9 years ago, although obviously not as highly as the man thought of himself. The permanent coach had got Hull City promoted to the Premier League in 2008, and following an incredible start which saw them win 6 of their opening 9 games, he found himself trying his hardest not to mention an England job in almost every post-match interview. After humiliating his squad with a half-time team talk minus a dressing room, he went on to lose 14 of the club's final 20 games, staying up by the skin of their teeth. Did not stop him breaking out the microphone and lapping up the credit though. He was sacked the following April, having steered the club headfirst into an inescapable relegation fight. He was appointed Preston boss in January 2011 and enjoyed relegation to League One 5 months later. The form did not improve and he was sacked in December. He was appointed Southend United boss in March 2013 and saw them promoted from League 2 2 years later. But he was also responsible for employing Niall Ranger, so obviously he's still prone to acting before thinking. Paul Jewell. If you thought Phil Brown's fall from grace was hard and fast, Paul Jewell's is just sickening. After guiding lowly Wigan Athletic into the Premier League in 2005, against all odds he kept them there for 2 straight seasons, even guiding them to a top half finish and a League Cup final in his first campaign. He was suddenly being tipped for international jobs left, right and centre. When he resigned in May 2007, he probably thought he was going to walk into a land of opportunity. 6 months later, he was stepping onto a landmine at Derby County. It took him almost a year and several on-camera meltdowns to win his first game. Coaching the worst Premier League side of all time will do that to you. And he was also involved in a leaked sex tape released midway through the season. Those who were unfortunate enough to have watched it are probably still in counselling. He left at the end of 2008 and did not step back into the fold until January 2011 when he was announced as Roy Keane's successor at Ipswich Town. He was sacked in October 2012 after winning just one of the club's opening 12 games. So what else has he been up to? Well, he was appointed Tony Pulis' assistant at West Brom in 2015, only to quit 7 days later after refusing to take a pay cut. Martin Jewell. Let's be honest, Spurs fans were underwhelmed when Martin Jewell was promoted from assistant manager to full-time boss in November 2004. By the time he was sacked 3 years later, midway through a UEFA Cup game, many were sad to see him go, with a dodgy case of lasagna having stood between him and Champions League qualification. He guided the club to consecutive 5th place finishes, their best ever seasons in the Premier League. Remember now, Harry Kane was probably watching Pokemon back then. Since then, he's enjoyed short-lived spells at Hamburg and Ajax, before returning to England with Fulham in 2011. He enjoyed a relatively comfortable first 2 seasons, before being sacked in December 2013 after 6 successive defeats. It didn't save the Cottagers. He found himself sitting at home annoying the wife until February 2016 when he was appointed coach of Al Ahly in the Egyptian Premier League. He quickly left 6 months later due to fears over his safety. Owen Coyle. It was August 2009. Newly promoted Burnley had just beaten Manchester United 1-0 at Turf Moor, having played a fearless, attractive brand of football, not often played by a team who had been used to knocking boots with Coventry and Doncaster. Eyebrows were raised when Owen Coyle took a seemingly sideways step to Bolton Wanderers in January 2010, with bigger clubs reportedly taking an interest. Burnley fell apart without him, and Coyle went on to guide the Trotters to 11th, and then an FA Cup semi-final the following season. But losing 5-0 to Stoke is nothing to write home about. Bolton were relegated in May 2012 and he was soon driven out of the club by a restless support, sacked in October of the same year. He succeeded Roberto Martinez at Wigan Athletic in June 2013 and left 6 months later, with the FA Cup winners lying 14th in the Championship. He spent 2 disappointing years with Houston Dynamo before contributing massively to Blackburn's relegation last season, before being chased out the door in February. So of all the clubs he signed for since Burnley, they've pretty much all gone up in flames. I'm sensing a common denominator. I wonder, does he? Michael Laudrup. What happened to Michael Laudrup? 4 years ago, the man was one of the most coveted managers in English football. The Danish icon had just led Swansea to their highest ever finish of 9th in the Premier League and lifted their first ever trophy, smashing Bradford 5-0 at Wembley, even if Nathan Dyer almost spoiled the party with a temper tantrum. He was suddenly being linked to the likes of Chelsea, Real Madrid and Barcelona. He was sacked in February 2014, having fallen out with the bosses in charge. A few months after leaving Wales, he was appointed head coach of Qatari side Lechira, or however you pronounce it, cashing in his managerial potential and European expertise for a bigger paycheck. He left the club a year later, but despite continued links with the Premier League, chose to sign with Al Rayyan in October 2016, where he has since remained. The man must have money coming out of his ears at this stage. Steve Clarke. Remember the West Brom side of 12-13? Romelu Lukaku bagging 17 goals as a 19-year-old, wins over Liverpool and Chelsea, the 5-5 draw in Sir Alex Ferguson's last ever game, and Steve Clarke masterminding the club's highest ever Premier League finish with 8th. He'd been an assistant at various clubs, but performed admirably during that campaign, and looked like he was ready to embark on a successful managerial career all on his own. He was sacked in December 2013 after winning 9 of the club's previous 41 Premier League games. He was appointed Reading boss in December 2014, guiding them to their first FA Cup semi-final in 88 years. In November 2015, he was even approached by Fulham, but chose not to take the job. He probably should have, because 2 weeks later, he was sacked. He sheepishly returned to the post of assistant boss, working alongside West Brom predecessor Roberto Di Matteo at Aston Villa. The duo were given the HITC in October 2016, and he hasn't been seen since. Brian Robson. If you were to think of Premier League leaders of this generation who should make a seamless transition into the managerial hot seat, you'd think of Steven Gerrard, John Terry and Frank Lampard. Brian Robson's name would be the first out of your mouth 20 years ago. The former Manchester United captain was a born leader and was tipped to succeed Sir Alex Ferguson. He won the Division 1 title with Middlesbrough in 1995, led the club to both domestic cup finals, and despite relegation in 1996, earned promotion once again the following season. However, he left the club in June 2001, having failed to guide the club any higher than 9th. He was unable to do much at a struggling Bradford City in Division 1, but was handed his third management job at West Brom in November 2004, where he became the first manager to steer his club to survival, having been bottom at Christmas. He was sacked in September 2006, having been relegated the previous season. He took in a brief spell at Sheffield United during the 07-08 season, before being fired and making his return to Manchester United as ambassador. He coached the Thailand national side between September 2009 and June 2011, despite having to deal with a diagnosis for throat cancer, before returning to Old Trafford, where he since resumed his ambassadorial roles. Paolo Di Canio. Now I know what you're thinking, what are you talking about? Paolo Di Canio was never promising in any way, shape or form. He just shouted into the camera a lot and made Conor McGregor look sane. Not so. The Italian maverick certainly hit the headlines for many a wrong reason, but he was actually very highly rated at Swindon Town, dragging them to the 2012 Football League Trophy final and their promotion from League 2 in April 2012. He began life well at Sunderland, hired in March 2013 to save them from yet another relegation battle. Despite his political skirmishes, the fans soon took to him. The 3-0 win at Newcastle in his second game definitely helped. He managed to keep them in the top flight before showing the squad exactly what he thought of them by signing 14 new players in the summer. He was sacked in September 2013 after just 5 games, where he alienated the players and confused the fans. He since applied for jobs at Bolton Wanderers, Rotherham and Rotherham again when he didn't take the hint the first time. He's also been suspended by Sky Sport Italia for presenting a tattoo supporting Benito Mussolini on television. Can't imagine that went down too well, considering the man was hung from a petrol station in Milan. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and make sure you check out Footy Feed for all the latest transfer rumours and news.